Zagazao, microphone check, 1, 2, microphone check, 1, 2. Let me just check, say everything I come through proper, nice and easy. If you can hear me right about now, do let me know. If anybody's locked in, I've already just started, isn't it? Let me just open by saying 10 Wadi. Be thankful unto the Most High, our Father of creation. Uncle Justin Neb, life, prosperity, and health, as spoken in the ancient Kemetic language. Uhudu means freedom, African power for all African people. This is Shakara, just doing a preview, kings and queens, a preview for the upcoming show tomorrow, featuring the one and only Brother Obadele Kambon. And we will be dealing with the ancient origin of Pan-Africanism, the ancient origin of Pan-Afrikanism. And that's going to be a beautiful, beautiful vibes right there. So I do want to let everybody know about that. Today, right now, all I'm going to be doing is a preview, right? So all I'm doing right now is a preview for that show right there, yeah? And we're just going to, as you can see on the screen right about now, just define Pan-Africanism. I'm gonna be giving definitions, yeah, of Pan-Africanism. And the whole point of giving definitions is because as the ideology of Pan-Africanism has evolved, various definitions have come to the forefront in terms of what Pan-Africanism is, and how it should be defined in these things. It appears that I can't get a presentation mode on this PowerPoint, which is very interesting. So yeah, we're just gonna go through it as it is on the screen right now, and see how it goes. All right. So if anybody is watching right about now, just let me know that you can see the screen, and also that you can. Oh, my big bro Netta Ankh is in the building. This is my master Basu, my Basu master kings and queens. This is the man that taught me and train me in terms of the arts of Sima Kemet Yoga. Give thanks, big bro, for being in the building. Vision is in the building as well. So I'm assuming I can be heard in it. So I'm going to go forward in this thing. Yeah. Can I be heard? Give me a 9 in the chat if I can be heard. Yeah. Just let me know that, my voice is coming through loud and clear. Yeah. I want to say if I can be heard though, making sure that the voice is coming through, you know what I mean? Because the voice is very important, So, yeah, let me know that I can be heard. Or maybe I can just check myself. Right, I seem to be coming through, so I'm gonna continue. Because nobody don't want to let me know so they can't hear me. But yeah, I'm gonna continue. All right, so I'm gonna be on for like half an hour at the most, yeah. Half an hour at the most. All right, give that to Ark. So half an hour at the most, yeah. I'm gonna be on. So tomorrow, we're dealing with this subject, the ancient origins of Pan-Africanism, and my brother Obadele Kambon, who is currently residing in Ghana, is going to be in the house, yeah, breaking it down. He has done some very unique and groundbreaking research on the subject of the ancient origins of Pan-Africanism. All I am doing today is giving definitions. I'm not going to go into no deep history, and I'm not even going to give a whole heap of context here. Normally when I give definitions, I give context as well for definitions. But we're just going to touch, we're going to, hit and run, hit and move, yeah? And I'm sure that Brother Obadele is going to go into some of this information tomorrow. So this is purely introductory, yeah? And we're just giving definitions, all right, to give people an understanding. Because I know many ones have asked this question. So obviously you can see that it's definitions of Pan-Africanism as it says in the video title, because we're going to be giving more than one. And so we're going to start from the 1900s, yeah, the early 1900s. Obviously, when we use the terms like ancient, we know that Brother Obadele is going to go long before 1900, but I'm dealing with from 1900 in terms of the particular coinage of the term Pan-Africanism. Pan basically means all, yeah? And African is black people. Yeah, so Pan-Africanism or Pan-African, literally translated, means all black people. So therefore, Pan-Africanism is an ideology that professes to be catering for the needs of, or relating to the needs of, all black people as a group. All right. And so Henry Sylvester Williams is the man responsible for coining the terminology Pan-African and Pan-Africanism. He had an organization called the Pan-African Association, which was formed in 1897, between 1897 and 1898. And that was principally about, the concern was the colonization of the African continent, which was formalized in 1884, 1885 with the Berlin Conference. And so the first Pan-African Conference was held in the year 1900s in London, England, of all places, yeah? And it featured Africans from all over the world, mostly from the Americas. However, there was at least one brother from Ghana and one brother from Sierra Leone, I understand. But most of the attendees were brothers and sisters from the Americas, United States of the Caribbean, and the South and Central Americas, yeah? So that's where the terminology Pan-Africanism comes into existence, as principally an anti-colonial movement. Enough more can be said about that, but we're just giving definitions today, so we're just going to move on and, you know, hit and run nice and easy, right? So what we see here is a definition that is provided by the online dictionary. Now, normally, I wouldn't start with the online dictionary definition for a subject like Pan-Africanism. I wouldn't do that, or defining Pan-Africanism. But there's a method to my madness this evening. Yeah, so we're going to go from the most surface level definitions, and then we're going to go a little bit deeper into certain other definitions. Yeah, and so obviously this is not a definition that I would say is against the general principle of Pan-Africanism. So we're going to work with it. Yeah, the online dictionary defines Pan-Africanism as the principle or advocacy of the political union of all the indigenous inhabitants of Africa. Yeah, so that's one definition that, you know, the online dictionary gives based upon its understanding of Pan-African movements. All right, moving on. This definition is taken from Wikipedia, but the sources that Wikipedia got it from are also listed here, which I won't go into, but you can read them. You should be able to read them on the screen. Okay. So, Pan-Africanism is a worldwide movement that aims to encourage and strengthen bonds of solidarity between all people of African descent, based upon a common fate going back to the Atlantic slave trade. The movement extends beyond continental Africans, with a substantial support base among the African diaspora in the Caribbean, Latin America, and the United States. Yeah. So in general principle, we're getting the idea. Yeah. The general idea is solidarity between all peoples of African descent. The idea of a common fate, a common origin, a common destiny. Yeah. These are all things that pertain to Pan-Africanism. One thing I will correct in this particular definition, however, is that the idea that it's based upon a common fate going back to the Atlantic slave trade. Most Pan-Africanists would actually suggest that the Pan-African sensibility is actually an organic expression. You know what I'm saying? So if we listen to people like Baba Kwame Ture, for example, he would argue that prior to colonialism, it was the dominant flow of African civilization to move from smaller group aggregates to larger group aggregates, and that would have inevitably taken us to a Pan-African formation in theory and practice anyway. But even in relation to fighting against oppression, most Pan-Africanists would look prior to the so-called transatlantic slave trade, at least, yeah, to the so-called trans-Saharan enslavement process of the Arabs, yeah. However, tomorrow with Brother Obadele Kambon, we're going to be going into ancient times, yeah, and the ancient origin of this sensibility. So we're going to be correcting some aspects of this definition tomorrow. All right, okay. Moving on to the continuation of the Wikipedia definition and the sources that are listed below the actual definition itself. It is based on the belief that unity is vital to economic, social, and political progress, and aims to unify and uplift people of African descent. The ideology asserts that the fate of all African peoples and countries are intertwined. At its core, Pan-Africanism is, quote, a belief that African peoples both on the continent and in the diaspora share not merely a common history, but a common destiny. All right? Okay. So again, those themes, yeah, common history, common destiny, come into play. Okay. So we're just defining kings and queens. Greetings to all that are just joining us. You know what I mean? We're just doing a quick preview, for the show tomorrow, which is the ancient origins of Pan-Africanism, featuring Brother Obadele Kambon. Shout out to my brother Khalid, aka Kola, my brother Tahaka, Scattered Minds, you know what I mean, Raheem Pepe, of course, Netta Ankh, Held Up Veil Vision already. Empress returns, you don't know. Greetings, Kushni Cosmetics. I mean, it's a pleasure to be sharing a live chat with you yesterday, my sister. Always a pleasure, because we ain't done that for a while still. You know what I mean? All right, so now we're gonna move from mainstream, yeah, you know what I'm saying, dictionary and, you know, them something there, definitions, and we're gonna come to people in the movement now. People that have been instrumental to defining Pan-Africanism, who are parts of the Pan-African movement itself, and therefore central to its definition and its evolution. The man on the screen is a man by the name of Baba Kwame Ture, yeah? And he comes into historical significance, firstly, as one of the leaders of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, which is a part of the civil rights movement in the southern states of America. You will find him standing right next to Martin Luther King, for example, along many of the marches, yeah, that were held in the South. But his evolution took him from being a civil rights activist to being the father of Black Power. Baba Kwame Ture popularized the term Black Power in a speech that he delivered in 1966. He went on to become one of the leading, if not the leading, Pan-Africanist in the 1970s through the 1980s, where he was at the helm of the All African People's Revolutionary Party, which was founded based upon the inspiration of Osajifo Kwame Nkrumah and Baba Sekou Touré. Kwame Ture, for whom he got his name, yeah, merging the legacies of Kwame Nkrumah and Sekou Touré, was an advisor to the revolutionary government that was headed by Osajifo Kwame Nkrumah and Sekou Touré in Guinea after the overthrow of Osajifo Kwame Nkrumah in Ghana, 1966. Okay, and so he defined, and the All African People's Revolutionary Party defines Pan-Africanism as the total liberation and unification of Africa and all African people under scientific socialism. And really, I should have underlined, yeah, this scientific socialism. I truly say I'm not in presentation mode. I can just do that right now, yeah? Under scientific socialism. We're not going to go into a definition of scientific socialism today. Suffice to say that this was the ideology of Kwame Nkrumah, specifically in terms of merging his African experiential sensibilities and cultural sensibilities, political sensibilities, with his also Marxist, socialist, leftist, workers of the world unite type leanings, yeah? And so he promoted the idea of scientific socialism, okay? Which is basically the definition and destiny of a society being in the hands of the masses of the workers, yes? And so he believed that Pan-Africanism is a total liberation and unification of Africa and all African people under scientific socialism, right? So this is a specific definition that relates to an ideology. We're going to go into another one, yes, ideological definition of Pan-Africanism in a sec, yeah? But I'm going to give you now a non-ideological definition of Pan-Africanism that this relates to, that tries to encompass all the ideologies under one in order to give an explanation of what Pan-Africanism is, yeah? So bear with me as we go into that one. This definition is presented by an activist that is in the community over here in the UK, and he goes by the name of Kofi Mawuli who is a member of the Pan-African Reparations Coalition of Europe, also known as PARCO. Brother Kofi is from Ghana, And he defines Pan-Africanism as an anti-imperialist decolonizational movement rallying together a broad array of all African-loving forces that are interested in link networking globally, and globally is a neologism, a new word which means globally and locally, in pursuit of various configurations of an independent worldwide political, ideological, cultural and organizational framework of struggle for the total liberation, unification, and self-determining progression of Africans and our kith and kin. All right. So what this emphasizes, again, yeah, just putting out some of the key terms here. Firstly, looking at globally, yeah, globally and locally. So the idea is that we work where we are and we link with Africans wherever Africans are. Yeah, that's very important. Okay. And then we're getting into now political, ideological, cultural, and organizational framework of struggle. So the idea is that Pan-Africanism is a process. Yeah, it is a process that begins from where we are at, and we understand that there are going to be challenges, which Brother Coffee defines as struggle. Yeah, so Pan-Africanism is the work, is not just the ultimate goal, but it's also the work that it takes to get to the ultimate goal of total liberation, unification, and self-determining progression for Africans. Okay, very important. There's much more that could be said on this, but we're going to move on for the sake of time. And this is just a preview. Yeah, we're just giving a preview to tomorrow's conversation with Brother Obadele Kambon. By the way, brothers and sisters, for everyone that's watching right about now, do feel free to hit up the like button. Yeah, you know what I'm saying, Carl? It matters in this internet universe. You know what I mean? Yeah, you know, so we give thanks. Oh, big up COE for mentioning that as well, my brother. Big up I Love Soil Do You in the building. I give thanks to all who are here. So one of the words that needs definition from Brother Coffee Clue's you know, explanation is this term imperialism, because he said it's an anti-imperialist. So we have to define imperialism, yeah? Because I'm conscious of the fact that oftentimes people speak about imperialism but never define it. So let's define it right about now. And this is a dictionary definition. Imperialism is a policy of extending a country's power and influence through colonization, use of military force, and other means. And so when we look at our experience and sojourn as African people, we can definitely understand that imperialism has been the key battlefield, yeah, in terms of the fact that the Europeans have engaged in what is called European imperialism. They have sought to extend the influence of the European sphere, yeah, of influence, yeah, through colonization and military force in particular, okay? And then we have cultural imperialism also, which relates to what they call soft power in today's world, but that is another subject for another time, all right? So, in moving on with the definitions of Pan-Africanism. Now, what happens is that when it comes to the growth and development of Pan-Africanism now, yeah, the term is coined in 1900, all right, which is the first Pan-African conference, okay? As movements evolve, you get different strains and strands, yeah, different ideological thrusts, different emphasis. And oftentimes those differences of emphasis form new or separate or distinct schools of thought within an ideology. Yes. So within Western democracy, yeah, you have liberalism, yes, which is a school of thought within Western democracy. And then you have conservatism, yeah, which is a school of thought which is within Western democracy. Pan-Africanism is no different, yeah, in terms of it has different leanings. So when I've already dealt with scientific socialism, yeah, this is a definition that would be defined as a socialist Pan-Africanist definition, yeah, you know what I'm saying, or a definition of socialist Pan-Africanism, and some might even say revolutionary Pan-Africanism. Okay, and so socialist Pan-Africanism is a school of thought within Pan-Africanism. Another school of thought within Pan-Africanism is nationalist Pan-Africanism, and I would define myself as a nationalist Pan-Africanist, yeah. And so in order to give to go in a little bit more, and I'm going to be a little bit biased here because I am a nationalist Pan-Africanist, so I'm going to use this nationalist Pan-Africanism as the kind of key case in terms of going into a more detailed definition of Pan-Africanism, right? I hope ones and ones bear with me. I'm going to be done in about 20 minutes. Yeah, we're not making it long today at all. Yeah, we're not making it long today at all. All right. And big up 20 faces in the building. Your statement, your statement or question. Pan-Africanism is therefore purely reactionary. We're going to actually go into that tomorrow. Yeah. So tune in tomorrow at 7 p.m. where we're dealing with the ancient origins of Pan-Africanism. And we're going to see whether Pan-Africanism is purely reactionary. However, if it is, yeah, would that be a negative thing? Is it a mark against Pan-Africanism that it is reacting to a particular circumstance? You see what I'm saying? There are many things in life that people develop in reaction to solving the need to solve a particular problem. Is that necessarily negative? And does it, because one is developing something to solve a particular problem caused from outside of one's self, does that mean that one cannot be proactive or is not being proactive? These are the questions. But once again, tune in tomorrow at 7 p.m. Shakara Speaks for the ancient origins of Pan-Africanism featuring Brother Obadele Kambon. So we're going to go into now the nationalist Pan-Africanist definition, and I'm going to explain why it's distinct from the socialist Pan-Africanist definition. Okay, so the next few slides are going to be taken from the political philosophy of the Al-Qaeda revivalist movement, which was written by my father, Brother Leader Bandaka. I was born and raised in this organization. Okay, and so we adapted the definition that was laid down, template that was laid down by Baba Kwame Ture and the All African People's Revolutionary Party, and defined a more nationalist Pan-Africanist definition for Pan-Africanism. And it reads: the total liberation and reunification of Africa and all African people, and the establishment of one continental and global African nationalist government and Ma'atian world order. So Ma'atian or Ma'at, yeah, Ma'atian means that which pertains to Ma'at. Yes, and Ma'at is a principle. Yeah, some may say even a deity, or it's a principle that is personified in a deity. Yeah, so Ma'at is at once a principle and also it's a deified principle. So you see Ma'at depicted and personified as a woman with wings, yeah, and a feather crown on her head. And there are some basic principles associated with Ma'at. Ma'at is truth, justice, righteousness, harmony, balance, reciprocity, and order. But Ma'at really symbolizes law, natural law, and social law. That is, so social law, the ultimate expression of social law is political law and economic law, yeah, which is based upon natural law, or is derived from, inspired by natural law. And the reason why this is important is because Ma'at is a principle that derives from our own culture as African people. So, for the nationalist Pan-Africanists, yeah, whereas socialism is a school of thought developed in Europe by Europeans from a nationalist Pan-Africanist perspective, the nationalists has a cultural inclination towards Africa, which says that we have to base our ideologies on things that come from our own culture, our own history, our own traditions. And so one of the things that the nationalist draws out is the principle of Ma'at, which was used to govern jurisprudence in ancient Kemet. Yeah. Another principle would be the principle of Ubuntu, which is in the Bantu languages, the principle of peoplehood. I am because we are. Yes. And these kinds of things. All right. So that's a brief definition of Pan-Africanism from a nationalist perspective. However, to go deeper, there are three essential themes. Yeah. Three central themes. Yeah. In the nationalist Pan-Africanist definition of Pan-Africanism. The first one is Africa for the Africans at home and abroad. This is a statement, a phrase coined by Baba Martin Delaney, and expanded upon by the Prophet Marcus Mosiah Garvey. So Martin Delaney said Africa for the Africans. Papagavi added at home, those at home and those abroad. All right. All descendants of Africa are its only natural and rightful citizens, owners, and rulers, and must therefore reaffirm this legacy. All right. This principle or essential theme is relating to the fact that Africa, first and foremost, is our home. And secondly, the continent, our home, has been invaded and commandeered by invaders for their own benefit. And therefore, we must reaffirm our connection, not just those of us who are born on the continent, but those of us who are anywhere in the world, to this home, yeah? Because land is the basis of independence and sovereignty. The second essential theme or central theme of Pan-Africanism from the nationalist Pan-Africanist perspective is look to Africa. Simply defined, all African people must be Africa focused, spiritually, culturally, politically, economically, and intellectually as the only authentic source of our philosophy, yeah? And this is essential because we have been taught not to look to Africa in terms of any of the gifts of human civilization. So if we're looking for a political philosophy, we must look towards Europe. If we're looking for an economic philosophy, we must look towards Europe. If we are looking for the highest expressions in art, we must look towards Europe. So our Pan-African sensibility suggests that instead of looking towards Europe as African people, we must look towards Africa, especially because Europe has been an enslaver and oppressor of African people. Third central theme of Pan-Africanism as defined by nationalists, yeah? One God or one Jah, one aim, one destiny. All Africans are one in blood and spirit and must thus unite continentally and globally towards one spiritual, cultural, political, and economic objective, yeah? And so essentially this is a spiritual kind of component, yeah? It's not necessarily religious, but it can relate to the religious realm. Why I say it's not necessarily religious is because the idea that our connection as African people is ancestral, it is ancient, and it is spiritual. There's a common unity that we have, yeah, as exemplified by the commonalities, the central commonalities in the various ways in which Africans have developed culture on the continent and across the world, yeah. And so this plays on themes that were developed by Baba Sheikh Anta Diop and Baba Theophile Obenga, and many others in terms of the cultural unity of Black Africa. Okay, so we're just dealing with a spiritual thing, but if we are going to take it to the religious level, then it is the idea that our culture must have an impact upon our religious outlook. Yeah, otherwise we are simply absorbing the cultures of other people, and in doing so, declaring their superiority and trying to become them in one way, shape, form, or another. All right. I hope everyone's following the thing so far. For those who are just joining the conversation, we are just engaging in a preview, yeah, for tomorrow's show, which is the ancient origins of Pan-Africanism, and I'm just giving some brief definitions as an introduction to what we're going to be delving into tomorrow. But yeah, I'm going to come back to the details of Wagwan tomorrow at the end of this, and I have about 10-15 minutes left. All right, 10-15 minutes left. And after this, we're all going to run over, yeah, to Scattered Minds, yeah, for the Scattered Minds show. You know what I'm saying? The Pan-African politics and pop culture show, Kings and Queens, because enough things are going. There's been some developments on the political scene in the UK today. So I'm sure my brother Tahaka is going to go in. So we're going to be joining him over there right after this. All right. So moving on. So I've defined Pan-Africanism, but I've introduced this concept of nationalism into the conversation. Okay. So the nationalist Pan-Africanist, what makes the nationalist Pan-Africanist distinct from other forms of Pan-Africanism? It's this principle of nationalism. All right. And so nationalism is defined as African people building and maintaining autonomous nations and communities with institutions designed to promote, preserve, and protect African lives by any means necessary. Yeah. Now, the other principle, I'll come back to this in a second. Yeah. So essentially, nationalism, yeah, has one fundamental principle and 7 essential principles. All right. And this is what makes nationalist Pan-Africanism distinct, yeah, distinct from other forms of Pan-Africanism, all right, is the emphasis on culture. So the fundamental principle from a nationalist, a black nationalist Pan-Africanist, is race first, yes, which is defined as race awareness and cultural emancipation first, i.e., putting the survival and prosperity of our people and culture before all other considerations. This being the only logical and viable response to the worldwide racial oppression and genocide facing us as a people, right? So when we say cultural emancipation, yeah, it's the emphasis on culture that makes nationalism distinct. And it is the emphasis of the idea that all people have the right to evolve their natural culture as they see fit, according to their own natural evolution, okay? And Africans have been systematically ripped from an appreciation of our own culture and taught to emulate the cultures of other people. And so a primary aspect of our liberation is the idea that we must delve into our own cultures, draw from them what we can in terms of evolving ourselves, yeah, politically, socially, economically, and in all spheres of human activity, but in particular relation to Pan-Africanism. Our own culture, our traditions, our experiences, our own history must inform our political ideologies and how we respond to forces that are trying to oppress us. Okay, so we don't just read Marx and apply Marx without understanding that Marx was was developing his thing within a cultural context, which is European culture. Yeah, if we learn something from Marx, good. But once we learn it, we put it in an African context and we make it African. We apply it in ways that relate to Africans and using concepts that come from Africans. Okay, so these 7 essential principles of nationalism now begins with one. Firstly, proud heritage, which is valuing and restoring African heritage, land, history, culture, and spirituality. Yeah, that's heritage as our only true source of identity, philosophy, ideology, resources, and empowerment. A lot of mercy. Yeah, so that's proud heritage, all right? And so this is the essential principle of Pan-Africanism in terms of the fact that no people can build anything from the position of being self-degraded or lacking cultural, collective self-esteem, okay? And so because the oppression of African people has engendered what Mama Joy de Grey or Joy de Grey Leary refers to as vacant esteem or vacant self-esteem, as in we have no collective self-esteem. We have to develop an ideology that institutes that self-esteem, and so that's why one of the 7 essential principles of nationalism, is a proud heritage. Secondly, self-governance, complete control, rulership, and leadership of African nations, communities, institutions, and resources by African people in the interest of African people. Yeah, self-governance. We don't want to be ruled by nobody else. Yeah, because that's what colonialism is. All right. So we're born colonialism. I want self-governance. All right. Self-reliance, depending upon our own resources, human and material, and institutions for the production and distribution of goods and services to fulfill our own needs and desires. Yeah. So self-governance is political. Self-reliance is economic. Okay. We're hitting a moving kings and queens. Very, very brief, right, today. And I would say we're not guided to no long things at all. All right. Is that 4th principle now? Separation. Now, this is the most controversial one. This is another one that separates nationalist Pan-Africanists from other forms of Pan-Africanism. Yeah. Exclusiveness in philosophy, ideology, and organization, as opposed to integration and assimilation into the systems, societies, philosophies, and institutions of others. Yeah, and I seem to have missed it out here, but that should say, it's there. So I made a mistake. Yeah, separation, exclusiveness in philosophy, ideology, and organization, as opposed to integration and assimilation into the systems and societies of others, in particular our intended oppressors. Yeah, in particular our intended oppressors. Now, separation, yeah, means that we have our own. that is exclusive to us. As Markham Isaiah Garvey says, except the individual, the nation, the race has power that is exclusive to that individual nation or race. That individual nation or race will be bound by the will of others who possess the great qualification of power. So we have to have power that is exclusive to ourselves. Does it mean that we don't interact with our people? No. It just means that when we do interact with other people, we interact from a position of exclusive power. Yeah. And that is because one of the dominant sensibilities among us is to assimilate into the systems of the people that are trying to oppress us, which only perpetuates our oppression. All right. I'm hoping all of this is making sense. Yeah. Big up content. Oh, check the mockers and the scoffers. I don't know who they are, but it's all good. You know what I'm saying? They're gonna be that's all part of the process. Yeah. And the reason why we're doing this and we're defining is because I should have said this at the beginning. Baba Kwame Ture says we should always be engaged in the political education of our people because our enemies are always politicizing us. Yeah, we should always be engaged in the political education of our people because our enemies are always politicizing us. So when we get mockers in the chat and, you know, people that come at Speaker's Corner and try to ridicule, and that is because those people are engaged in white supremacist Eurocentric politicization of African people, and they recognize when Africans are trying to empower other Africans through political education. Yeah, they may not even be consciously thinking on that level, but it's a knee-jerk reaction because, you know, Eurocentrism is incredibly consistent. You know, and it's so consistent that we have to respect it to some degree. All right, moving on. Self-defense, defending ourselves by any means necessary against all forms of oppression and exploitation or threats to obtaining and maintaining our liberation. That one speaks for itself, so I'm going to move on. Land acquisition, striving for the acquisition of land at home and abroad as a sacred right, as well as the basis of nationhood, power, revolution, and therefore our total liberation. As Mutabaruka always says, land is the basis of independence. If you don't have any land, you don't have any independence. Yeah. So land acquisition is essential because colonization was essentially the process of dispossessing African people of our land. So we need to repossess ourselves of our land. Yeah. All right, moving on. And finally, repatriation, the process of returning all African people, mind, soul, and body, ultimately to Mama Africa as our natural homeland. I'm emphasizing here mind, soul, and body. Yeah. So just like for a Pan-Africanist or a nationalist Pan-Africanist, it is essential for Africans to have a mental, spiritual, and physical connection to our homeland. It's not imperative necessarily that we live, yeah, in Africa, but that we do go to visit, yeah, spend time in and connect with the motherland. And also beyond when we're not there, that we direct our energies, yeah, our political, social, economic energies towards the maintenance of our motherland. Okay, in a similar way, just to draw some examples, yeah, because there's precedents for this in today's world. There are Jews all over the world that are citizens of various different countries, but they pay taxes to the Jewish state. Yeah. And they make it a point to visit Israel, yeah, and these kinds of things. In a similar way, if you take it on a spiritual level, it's similar to the idea that when Muslims pray, they face Mecca, yeah, and it is a part, yeah, it's an essential article of faith, yeah, among Muslims to visit Mecca, because as a land, as a Mecca is a spiritual home of Islam, yeah, and so. Repatriation for the nationalist Pan-Africanists is a mental, spiritual, and physical goal, aim, and essential principles. All right, what's the time? 5 minutes left. We're going to go quickly, yeah? So just to explain a little bit further, yeah? Having made that point about repatriation, I just want to deal with this particular subject, yeah? And I'm just going to read this quote from Baba Kwesi Pra, cultural scientist, linguist, who I'm endeavoring to get back on the platform in the not too distant future. All right. He says, I made the point that we have got to be wary about what I call, quote unquote, continentalism. That is the argument that Pan-Africanism means still for us today the unity of the African continent in the first place, a unity of post-colonial states, and not, as I would say and insist, the unity of peoples whose history and culture derive from the African continent and are conscious of this affinity and wish to develop these roots as a basis for the social and economic emancipation of African people. All right, he goes on. My definition fundamentally recognizes the link with the diaspora as more important than the notion of continental unity per se, which is essentially geographical. In other words, the unity of the greater part of this continent logically would emerge more as a consequence than a cause. Again, in other words, if people of African history and descent unite, that is, if the African nations unite, most of the continent of Africa will unite. Yeah. And so this is important because there are so many definitions of Pan-Africanism to the point whereby there are many Pan-Africanists even who question even whether we should be using the term Pan-Africanism anymore because it has been so co-opted. And there are others who say, no, we have to actually wrestle back control and definition of this term. But Baba Kwesi Pratt is basically saying that the continent as we know it today is under neo-colonial rule. In other words, it is under the economic control of the so-called former colonizers, even as we have black people in positions of stateship, state headship, all right? And the borders and those, as a result of that, the borders, the nation states that we define as African are actually colonial constructs. So the emphasis is not on uniting the colonial constructs, yes, but on uniting the peoples of Africa across the world. And when we do that, the peoples of Africa will create states, or a state, a federation of states that will meet our own needs and be constructed according to our own will. So it's about the people first. Okay, that's what that is emphasizing. All right. All right. Now we have to deal with the ultimate purpose of Pan-Africanism, and this is where it's my last two slides. Yeah. The ultimate purpose is liberation, the process of obtaining power to control every aspect of our lives, exercising the right to define, defend, and develop ourselves as the masters of our own destiny. But I am a student of the great, the powerful, the wonderful, and the illustrious Mama Marimba Ani. And she encourages us to define Pan-Africanism within the context and according to the goal, achieving the goal of world African sovereignty. Yeah. Now, Mama Marimba, the definition here is me, kind of developing on Mama Marimba. So these are my own words, having learned from Mama Marimba Ani. Yeah. And she says, and I'm saying based upon that inspiration, world African sovereignty is a self-governing African-centered global African nation built upon the cultural agency of African people in all areas of people activity. Yeah. And so what Mama Marimba is saying to us is that we have to define what liberation is. And in terms of defining liberation, she defines it as world African sovereignty. It's more specific. And what she's saying is that we have to be more specific. So the ultimate goal of Pan-Africanism is world African sovereignty, which is self-rulership, self-governance of African people, and essentially not being ruled by colonizers and enslavers. All right. So what I've attempted to do just then is give you a range of definitions. Yeah. I haven't exhausted all the definitions across the spectrum of Pan-Africanism, but I've attempted to give you a few that would be able to give you an idea of basic definitions and also the principles associated with those definitions, in terms of what the specific goals are, in different areas of people activity in different walks of life, across the spectrum, there will be points of disagreement, there will be points of differences in emphasis, However, the basic ideas most Pan-Africanists would agree on. And so I hope that you get a sense of that in what I presented today thus far. Another day we'll go deeper into the different schools of thought in Pan-Africanism, and maybe host some debates or whatever else like that and go deeper into the whole thing. This has been merely an introduction to tomorrow's live presentation and live chat. I'll be joined by Brother Obadele Kambon, who is a master linguist, cultural scientist, and a senior research fellow at the Institute of African Studies, which is a part of the University of Ghana. Dr. Obadele Kambon speaks 4.5 African languages and is one of the key brothers in our world African community who is developing on Pan-African theory and practice through his work. Some of his work is to detail what some may call proto-Pan-Africanism, which is Pan-Africanism before the term Pan-Africanism was coined. And Brother Obadele, in his research, has discovered the ancient origins of Pan-Africanism as they manifested in our sojourn as African people. And so because most people consider Pan-Africanism to be a Johnny-come-lately ideology that just came up in reaction to colonialism in 1900s, and also that Pan-Africanism is an ideology that is just dreamed up by Africans in the diaspora who know nothing, little or nothing about Africa, the African continent, or African people on the African continent. Yeah, we are going to be challenging this school of thought by delving deep into the ancient origins of Pan-Africanism. Tomorrow, right here, Shakara Speaks. The link is in the description. Set your reminder from now. We're going to go in. Brother Obadele, yeah, is going to be delivering a presentation for about an hour. Then we're going to open the lines live, yeah, for brothers and sisters to come in, make statements, ask questions, even bring challenges. Yeah, throw your challenges in there. You know what I'm saying? Rebut. Yeah, try so to do. Yeah, to anything that Brother Obadele or myself brings to that conversation and that discussion. That's right here, Kings and Queens. The link is in the description of this video. 7 p.m. tomorrow. 7 p.m. tomorrow, the 28th, Thursday the 28th of the month called November. Right now, it's all about the Pan-African politics and pop culture show, yeah, which is Scattered Minds. Scattered Minds is in the chat. So click on them 3 little dots when you hover over his name and go to channel. Brother Tahaka, if you got the link ready, post it in the chat right now. Yeah, post the link for the video in the chat right now. So I want all the 22 people that are watching me right about now to run over, yeah, to the Pan-African politics and pop culture show coming to you on Scattered Minds. Scattered Minds has got the spanner, yeah, in the chat, Kings and Queens. So run over to his channel right about now. Run over to his channel right about now. Pan-African politics and pop culture show. I will see you all tomorrow. Yeah, ancient origins of Pan-Africanism, presentation and live chat, Thursday, the 28th of November, 7 p.m. Yeah, 7 p.m. For all my brothers and sisters in America, that's 2 p.m. Eastern time. That's 2 p.m. Eastern time. Big up DCB. Yeah, sorry, DC Brad 925 for the little US currency. Make Africa black again. Most definitely, my brother. Most definitely. Thank you for joining, man. So we're going over to the Pan-African politics and pop culture show right about now. Scattered Minds. Tomorrow, ancient origins of Pan-Africanism. Presentation and live chat. Thursday, the 28th of November, 7 p.m. GMT, 2 p.m. EST, right here on Shakara Speaks. Kings and Queens, I look forward to seeing you then. Tendai Mwadi, be thankful unto the Most High, Mother, Father of creation. Uncle Jasaneb, life, prosperity, and health for all African people. Uhuru means freedom. Abibi Tumi, black power. Abibi Fahodie, black African liberation. For all, Abibi Four, black African people.